So we've all seen those artists that seem to just constantly crank out masterpieces. I mean, seriously, these nerds can just do no wrong. And I mean nerd in the best way possible. Well, believe it or not, when you see an artist constantly having hit after hit after hit with their work, it's not because they're extremely talented. I mean, well, forget what I just said. Duh, there's some talent involved, but that isn't even the biggest reason. Also, don't worry, this video isn't going to be me telling you about the importance of practice and hard work because who wants to hear about that crap, you know? With that being said, I'm going to be showing you 3 cheat codes. No, I'm kidding, but seriously, 3 principles to help make your art objectively better. But art is subjective. Yeah, well, not when it's bad. Man, that was a pretty good one. The first principle, are you ready for this? Is balance. No, no, don't click off the video yet. It gets better. Let me explain. A lot of people have a basic idea of balance. What tends to come to mind is symmetry, which, yeah, symmetry is balance, but that's boring sometimes, and you don't want to be boring, right? Oh, and by the way, these principles help your painting so much that I've decided to only use 5, count it 5, colors, just to let the technique speak for itself. That's actually not the main reason why, but wow, that would have been pretty cool for the video. It's really because I was being cheap and I use limited palettes all the time anyways, but yeah, it really does force your technique to have to speak for itself, so I'm still pretty cool, I think, right? Anyway, think about balance in terms of, yeah, there's a similar amount of, I guess, weight on one side as well as the other, but think 3-dimensionally. Now, what does that even mean? Well, apparently I suck at explaining, so let's look at examples from paintings I've done. Exhibit A. Now this is balanced. Let me try to explain the whole 3D thing again. So here goes. You see how the bread on the surface is closer to us in the foreground, while the bottle is farther in the background. That adds enough power on the right side to counteract the bread basket, which is more towards the middle left of the painting. I mean, sometimes I surprise myself. I'm just flexing my paintings here at this point. I'm kidding, but here is a more simple composition. Since there is no difference in depth, everything is on an even playing field. And this is probably the closest thing to symmetry that I've done. The moral of the story here is, well, balance looks good. Yeah, we'll go with that. The next thing here is very important. Contrast. Now, if you know what contrast is, great. But again, don't exit out the video or anything because contrast is very complex, and also because I don't know, just don't. This takes many forms. You can have contrast of value, which is what people might generally think of with contrast. This is the difference between how light and how dark things are. This can be the difference between something looking like a cartoon and looking like realism. And I don't know which one you prefer, but I'm definitely going to stay unbiased so that you keep watching the video. There's also contrast of color and temperature, which definitely isn't present in this painting because the whole thing is warm. You usually want to have warm and cool to balance out the artwork. I mean, imagine if you were warm and cool at the same time. what where where was I going with that? Anyways, oh, I'm from Arizona and I've still met some cool people. Yeah, that's why I lost my thought there because it wasn't good. Moving on, there's also contrast of texture. I usually do this by having shadows and more distant subjects in the painting having a more flat or blurry texture, while the areas that have lots of focus contain tons of texture. All in all, contrast can really determine how strong of a piece you create. Do you want your art to be like a power lifter, or do you want it to be like a long distance runner? Well, there's no need to answer that because honestly, I don't even know the answer to that because I would do neither of those things. The last, but definitely not least, principle that predicts a successful painting is proportion. Particularly in realism, but it's not just limited to realism. It's just imagine you're painting a portrait of your significant other per se, and you miss the shape of the nose by a couple millimeters. They are not going to be happy about that. Even though you put hours and hours of effort into it, the proportions were wrong. And now your relationship is over, as it should be. All jokes aside, portraits are probably the easiest way to explain why proportion is so important because, wow, it can make a brother look like a cousin, and now there's just beef for no reason. And you don't want that. Our human lizard brains can detect when something isn't sitting right, even if it's close to sitting right. Kind of slouched a little bit, I don't know. But your lizard brain may not be worth listening to sometimes because there is, of course, room for abstraction in creativity. I don't know why I'm saying lizard brain. Also, don't use me as a reliable source. I just know from experience that people notice when little things don't look right, and it probably has nothing to do with lizards at all, so there's that. But yeah, proportion, especially, again, I'm going to reiterate, in representational art, can be the difference between a good and a bad painting. And one of the ways I get better at this is something I mentioned in my last video, which is painting from life. Doing so forces you to kind of focus in and dial in on those things that make the thing the shape that it is. And you have the reference right in front of you, which is what I did with this painting, and I think it ended up looking all right. I don't know though. You be the judge. So balance, contrast, and proportion. To summarize, I don't know. I tried to think of a joke there, but nothing came to me. So those things can for sure be the difference between a successful and an unsuccessful painting. Thanks for watching, and subscribe, like, do all that cool stuff. I'd appreciate it.